I honestly believed that my new career in movies was going to sink to the bottom of the sea.
Steven Spielberg has worked with Hollywood royalty, but behind the scenes, not all stars left him starstruck. Out of the countless A-listers who've stood in front of his camera, only 6 earned a spot on a very personal list, some for their genius, others for reasons you'd never expect. One of them even rescued him during the darkest shoot of his career, while another almost refused him for years before a surprising phone call flipped everything. The names? You think you know them, but the reasons they're here might leave you blinking twice. Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep's place on Steven Spielberg's list might come as a surprise to many.
But I've never worked with Meryl, except she did 30 minutes with me playing the voice of the Blue Fairy on AI. But we've never made a real movie together like this. And it all started to come together because this could not have been a more relevant story for our time.
She is widely known as one of the most skilled and respected performers in the film industry. Over her career, she has received more awards and nominations than most actors could ever hope for, including 3 Oscars. With that kind of track record, many would expect her to be completely confident stepping into any role. But when Spielberg approached her for the post, her reaction was not what most people would imagine.
Katharine Graham will be Meryl Streep. I've always wanted to work with Meryl.
Streep later shared that she was genuinely nervous about the project. This was not because of the subject matter or the size of the role, but because she would be working under Spielberg's style of directing. He is known for not holding rehearsals. Instead, he prefers to roll the camera right away, capturing raw and unfiltered moments from the actors. For someone as precise and thoughtful as Streep, the idea of going straight into filming without a warm-up period felt intimidating. Adding to that pressure was the fact that she would be sharing the screen with Tom Hanks. By this time, Hanks had already worked with Spielberg multiple times and was used to his way of working.
My 5th film with Tom,
On set, Hanks arrived prepared, locked into his character, and ready to deliver without hesitation. Streep, in contrast, felt like she was stepping into unfamiliar territory, unsure how she would adapt to such a fast-moving process. Her role in the post was Katharine Graham, the publisher of the Washington Post during the time of the Pentagon Papers scandal. Graham was a complex figure, reserved yet determined, hesitant at times but willing to make bold decisions when it counted. The character required subtle changes in posture, expression, and tone to show her gradual transformation from uncertain leader to someone who takes full control. Spielberg later recalled one scene that showed exactly why Streep earned his admiration. In this scene, Graham sits silently in a boardroom as people talk over her, doubt her, and expect her to step aside. Streep holds the silence for several moments, letting the tension build, and then delivers a short line that changes the entire energy of the room. Spielberg said that the way she commanded that moment, using almost nothing but stillness, was something rare even among top-tier actors. The production schedule for The Post was unusually fast. Spielberg decided to make the film shortly after the 2016 election, feeling the urgency to tell the story. With little time for preparation, Streep stepped into the role and found her rhythm quickly. According to Spielberg, every glance, pause, and movement she gave on screen felt honest and grounded in truth. Despite her initial nerves, Streep delivered a performance that matched the speed and intensity of the shoot. Spielberg admitted that he often wanted to compliment her between takes, but stopped himself so he wouldn't break her focus. For him, her work in The Post confirmed why she deserved a place among his most memorable collaborations.
There's commitment, and then there's Daniel Day-Lewis.
Daniel Day-Lewis. Daniel Day-Lewis is often called one of the most committed actors in film. Known for completely disappearing into his roles, he takes long breaks between projects and chooses scripts with great care. That is why it was not easy for Steven Spielberg to bring him on board for Lincoln. In fact, Day-Lewis turned the part down more than once.
Conversation with Steven Spielberg and Daniel Day-Lewis.
Spielberg had wanted to make a film about Abraham Lincoln for years. From the very beginning, he pictured Day-Lewis wearing the top hat and beard. The director believed no one else could bring the same presence and depth to the role. But when Spielberg first reached out, Day-Lewis declined politely, even sending him a handwritten letter to say no. For most directors, that would have been the end of the conversation. Spielberg, however, was not ready to give up. Hoping to meet Day-Lewis's expectations, Spielberg asked writer Tony Kushner to rework the script. The goal was to shape it more closely to what the actor might respond to. Still, even with a new version, Day-Lewis turned it down again. For a time, Spielberg offered the role to Liam Neeson, who seriously considered it but eventually stepped away. Then came an unexpected twist. Leonardo DiCaprio, who had worked with both men in the past, spoke directly to Day-Lewis about the project. It is unclear exactly what DiCaprio said, but something in that conversation made Day-Lewis willing to read the new script. This time, he saw something different in the story, and he agreed to take the part.
So it was actually my job to go speak with him.
From the moment filming began, Day-Lewis committed to his usual intense process. He stayed in character the entire time, speaking in Lincoln's voice even when the cameras were not rolling.
After Daniel committed to play Abraham Lincoln, we postponed the film for a year. So we actually spent a year with Tony Kushner, Daniel, myself in conversation. Daniel and I had an entire year to get to know each other. We became friends during that year, and we were friends on the first day of shooting. And all of the big...
Spielberg respected this approach so much that he often referred to him as Mr. President on and off set. Spielberg remembers the first day of shooting vividly. The very first scene they filmed had Lincoln lying by the fire next to his son. Watching the monitor, Spielberg became emotional, saying the moment felt so real that it moved him to tears. The final day of filming was even more intense. The last scene shot was Lincoln's deathbed. When it ended, Day-Lewis hugged Spielberg and, for the first time in months, spoke in his own natural British voice. It was a sudden reminder that Lincoln was a role, not a living presence, and Spielberg admitted it felt like saying goodbye to the man himself. The performance earned Day-Lewis his third Academy Award for Best Actor. For Spielberg, though, the true reward was having the chance to collaborate with someone so completely transformed by their work. It was not only about the film's success, but also about the rare creative connection that had finally happened, thanks in part to a single phone call from Leonardo DiCaprio. Robin Williams. Robin Williams working with Steven Spielberg might not seem unusual at first.
Playing that character. When he began to evolve into the Pan, then he was able to express it more through the character and less in between the shots. I thought it was really interesting.
They teamed up for the 1991 movie Hook, with Williams playing an adult Peter Pan who had forgotten his past. The film was big, colorful, and filled with imagination. Yet Spielberg later admitted it was not one of his favorite projects. He felt the production became messy and harder to control than expected. Even so, Williams left a strong mark on him. On set, he brought energy and humor to everyone around him. He could shift the mood of the crew instantly, keeping the long days from feeling too heavy. This spark became the start of a friendship that would later take on a much deeper meaning. 2 years after Hook, Spielberg began filming Schindler's List in Poland. The subject of the film was the Holocaust, and the production took place near the remains of Auschwitz. The story, setting, and historical weight made it one of the most difficult experiences of Spielberg's career. The work was emotionally exhausting, and even the crew felt the strain. Spielberg later said there were days when simply saying the word action was hard because it echoed a term used during Nazi deportations. During this time, Robin Williams decided to help in his own way. From the United States, he would call Spielberg once a week at the same time. Each call lasted about 15 minutes, during which Williams would perform an improvised comedy routine just for him. No cameras, no audience, just a private show to make his friend laugh. The calls were not planned as part of any publicity or work obligation. They were simply Williams' way of offering relief to someone who was carrying the weight of telling such a harrowing story. Spielberg said that those moments of laughter were essential. The jokes were fast, unpredictable, and often ridiculous, and they gave him a needed release from the constant heaviness of the set. Williams had a habit during these calls. He never said goodbye. Instead, he would end while Spielberg was still laughing, hanging up mid-joke as if to leave on the highest note possible. Spielberg recalled that this made the humor feel even more powerful, like a burst of light in an otherwise dark period. While Hook might not have been the director's personal favorite, Williams' role in it was still unforgettable to him. It was not only about the performance on screen, but about the kind of person Williams was when the camera stopped. His willingness to give time and energy to a friend without expecting anything in return left a lasting impact. For Spielberg, these weekly calls became more than a kind gesture. They were a lifeline. They reminded him that even during a project built around tragedy, there could still be moments of joy. That is why Robin Williams earned a place among the actors Spielberg will always remember. Leonardo DiCaprio. Leonardo DiCaprio was already one of the most recognizable actors in the world when he worked with Steven Spielberg for the first time. Just a few years earlier, Titanic had made him a global star, and many expected him to continue playing romantic leads or roles that focused on his image as a heartthrob. Instead, DiCaprio chose something very different, a fast-moving, tricky part in Spielberg's 2002 film, Catch Me If You Can.
Steven was off doing a movie at the time where I first became interested. And I had been basically attached to the project for about a year and a half.
The movie was based on the real story of Frank Abagnale Jr., a young man who, before turning 19, successfully posed as a pilot, doctor, and lawyer, all while running a series of elaborate scams. It was a role that required more than charm. The actor had to make the audience believe in the lies, while also showing the insecurity and loneliness hiding beneath the surface. Spielberg cast DiCaprio not because of his fame, but because he saw that DiCaprio could balance those two sides of the character. He compared both DiCaprio and Abagnale to masters of social camouflage, able to walk into almost any setting and convince people they belonged there. DiCaprio approached the project with a level of detail that impressed Spielberg. He read Abagnale's autobiography, listened to recordings of him speaking, and searched for small details that might make the performance feel more authentic. One example came from a scene involving Frank and a call girl. The moment was not in the original script, but DiCaprio found it in the book and felt it revealed something important about the character. He lobbied for its inclusion, and Spielberg agreed to add it. The tone of Catch Me If You Can was unusual for both men. It was playful, with quick pacing and moments of humor, but it also carried an undercurrent of sadness. Frank's life of deception is exciting to watch, yet it is also a life spent running away. Spielberg allowed DiCaprio the freedom to explore both sides, shifting from light, fast-talking scenes to quiet, reflective moments without losing the rhythm of the story. Working alongside Tom Hanks, who played the FBI agent chasing Frank, DiCaprio held his own in scenes that often relied on quick exchanges and unspoken tension. Spielberg later praised the way DiCaprio could make the audience root for a character who was clearly breaking the law, simply by showing the human vulnerability underneath. For many viewers, this performance marked a turning point in DiCaprio's career. It proved he could step away from the image built by Titanic and take on roles that were more complex and less tied to traditional leading man expectations. For Spielberg, it was confirmation that DiCaprio was more than a star. He was an actor who could bring intelligence, humor, and depth to a part without letting one overshadow the others. That combination is what earned him a place on Spielberg's list of favorites, even if his inclusion may surprise those who only remember his earlier work. Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford is closely linked to one of Steven Spielberg's most famous creations.
I owe Harrison a great personal debt because he approved my choice for the character of Willie Scott, an actress named Kate Capshaw. And thank you, Harrison, because had you not approved her, I cannot imagine what my life would be like today.
Indiana Jones. For many moviegoers, it is difficult to imagine anyone else in the role. Yet, when Raiders of the Lost Ark was first being planned in the late 1970s, Ford was not Spielberg's first choice. Spielberg wanted someone new and less familiar to audiences. It was George Lucas, his friend and collaborator, who suggested Ford after other casting options fell through. Once Ford stepped onto the set, any doubts faded. He seemed to naturally fit the part, confident, resourceful, and able to mix seriousness with humor. The raised eyebrow, the dry remarks, and the way he handled action scenes all became key parts of Indiana Jones' personality. Spielberg has said that Ford did not just play the character, he became him during filming. Their collaboration went far beyond the first film. Over the years, they worked together on Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, building a strong working relationship and personal friendship. Spielberg came to trust Ford's instincts on set, knowing he could deliver both the physical demands and the subtle acting moments. The friendship also included a fair amount of humor. One well-known story involves an unauthorized biography about Ford that he disliked. When Ford visited the set of The Goonies, Spielberg handed out hundreds of copies of the book to the crew as a joke, making sure Ford saw everyone pretending to read it. It was the kind of teasing that showed how comfortable they were with each other. Ford's connection to Spielberg's work also extended beyond Indiana Jones. His then-girlfriend, Melissa Matheson, was a screenwriter. When Spielberg pitched her the idea for E.T., she was not interested at first. Ford encouraged her to reconsider, and she eventually wrote the script for what became one of Spielberg's most beloved films. In a small way, Ford helped bring another classic to life. Spielberg has often made it clear that Indiana Jones will always be Ford's role. He has said there would be no recasting, no passing the torch to a younger actor for a new version. For Spielberg, Ford's portrayal is so tied to the character that replacing him would not work. They even filmed a light-hearted cameo of Ford as a school principal in E.T., though it was cut from the final version. Moments like that show how much Spielberg enjoyed keeping Ford involved in his projects, whether on screen or behind the scenes. Ford's place on Spielberg's list of favorite actors is not surprising, but the history behind it shows that their collaboration almost never happened. From a last-minute casting choice to decades of shared work and personal trust, Ford became more than just the face of a franchise. He became one of Spielberg's most reliable and enduring creative partners.
Words of Stephen Ambrose, whose book Band of Brothers inspired Tom to bring an even larger story to the small screen. And he enlisted me, and together with HBO.
Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg have one of the most steady and long-lasting working relationships in modern film. Long before they worked together, they already knew each other in everyday life. They lived in the same neighborhood, their children were close in age, and they often traded history books or talked about documentaries. By the time a project came along that suited both of them, they already had a personal connection. Their first major film together was Saving Private Ryan in 1998. The role of Captain John Miller required someone who could show quiet strength, leadership, and vulnerability. Spielberg knew Hanks could deliver that balance without forcing it. The film became a landmark in war cinema and won wide praise for its realism and emotional impact. It also set the tone for many of their later collaborations, which often focused on historical subjects. Over the years, Hanks and Spielberg worked together on several projects, including Catch Me If You Can, The Terminal, Bridge of Spies, and The Post. They also collaborated behind the scenes on television series like Band of Brothers and The Pacific, both of which dealt with the World War II. The pattern in their work is clear. They often choose stories that explore real events, moral choices, and the human side of history. Spielberg has spoken about why he values Hanks so much as an actor. One of the qualities he admires most is Hanks' ability to bring dignity to a role. Even when playing an ordinary person, Hanks can give the character a sense of moral clarity and reliability. Spielberg believes this is part of why audiences connect with him. Viewers trust him almost instantly. An example of this came during Bridge of Spies, where Hanks played a lawyer negotiating a tense prisoner exchange during the Cold War. The role required a calm, principled performance without grand speeches or exaggerated drama. Hanks brought a natural presence to the part, making the story believable without drawing attention to the acting itself.
Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg teaming up again, this time in the Cold War thriller Bridge of Spies. The movie's already getting rave reviews, a standing ovation at its world premiere Sunday night at the New York Film Festival.
Their collaboration is also shaped by an unusual working style. Spielberg and Hanks rarely spend time discussing acting techniques or directing notes in detail. Instead, they share material, scripts, books, or articles, and quickly reach an understanding about whether a project is right for both of them. When they both feel strongly about a script, they move forward with trust in each other's abilities. Spielberg once joked that casting Tom Hanks means also bringing along every comforting memory the audience has of him, from earlier films to the voice of Woody in Toy Story. But he also pointed out that Hanks still finds ways to surprise people, even after decades in the business. It is no surprise that Hanks is at the top of Spielberg's list of favorite actors. Their partnership is built on trust, shared interests, and a proven track record of meaningful films. Together, they have created stories that continue to resonate with audiences long after the credits roll. Now you know Spielberg's top 6 favorites, but which one shocked you the most? Drop your answer in the comments. Hit that thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories from behind the camera. And while you're here, click on one of the 2 videos on your screen. You won't want to miss them.